HOA lady has to follow rules eventually, posted by Swites. I bought my first house in 1999 and I wanted DirecTV. I put up a satellite dish, which happened to be behind a privacy fence. I also knew the FCC ruling that HOAs couldn't prevent you from putting up a dish due to some malfeasance with home builders who would make shady deals with cable companies to force homeowners to go with the specific company. I think that's right. I figured I wouldn't have any issues since it was behind a fence anyway. I got a knock at my door the next day, and it was my neighbor from across the cul-de-sac telling me she's on the board of the HOA. Your dish is in violation and must be removed. This was my first encounter with her, and I politely explained the law as I knew it and told her to have a nice day. We didn't speak again, and she ended up moving out soon. Well, it turns out she didn't move out and was just renting to some other lady that I never spoke to, and the HOA lady moved back in a year later. There was an easement behind my house which was properly mowed when I moved in. I would hit golf balls down there with my wedge, and my neighbor was into archery and used it as his range. By the second summer that I lived there, it was overgrown and an eyesore. I couldn't even see the creek just behind my house anymore. One weekend, I borrowed my dad's utility trailer, and I spent 3 days clearing out our little section behind the houses, hauling all the debris away, probably 2 trips a day. My arms were covered in cuts from the briars, and apparently I was also dealing with sumac, poison ivy, or some other stuff, because by Monday, I was having an allergic reaction so badly that I went to the doc to get a steroid shot. I laid up in the house all day, and I get a knock at the door. It's the neighbor woman again. Apparently, there's a rule that you cannot store a trailer in the driveway for more than 3 days, and this was day 4. I needed to remove it by the end of the day or face a $500 fine. She handed me a paper listing the rule, and I considered just paying the fine, but instead I angrily drove an hour each way to return my dad's trailer after spending half the day already waiting in a hospital lobby. I got home after dark. What struck me as odd was there was a list of things that you couldn't store in your driveway: personal watercraft, boats, trailers, and so on. The odd part was that motorcycle was listed on there. I don't ride one myself, but I thought it was a totally reasonable thing to keep in a driveway. After I finished all of this work, this woman would routinely walk through my yard without asking, but since she was taking her grandkid to play in the creek, I never even said anything, though it bothered me that she never asked. A year or so later, I wanted to sell the house and move into something bigger. I had talked to a realtor already, and I was getting things tidied up to have the house shown. As I was cleaning out a drawer, I noticed that paper the HOA lady had given me, and I remembered the part about motorcycles being listed. You see, the HOA lady had started dating an older gentleman, and he had moved in with her. Turns out, he rode a Harley, which was always parked in her driveway. She was home, so I walked over there and politely informed her about the violation. The next day, the motorcycle was parked on her back porch, the one she bragged about to everyone who would listen so that she could tell them how much it cost. I laughed to myself, but then I remembered the part about it needing to be behind a fence. Another knock at the door, and within a few days, a fence company was building a 6-foot privacy fence which completely hid her fancy new deck. My realtor had been on my case for at least a week about needing to put up a for sale sign, so as soon as the fence was finished, I told her that it was okay. I sold the house quickly and moved out at the end of the month. Oh, and by the way, the fence was completely hideous and looked out of place because of the way her lot was shaped. Oh, what's the old saying? Rules for thee, but not for me? Look, HOA lady, you're going to obey the rules if OP has to. Alright, what do you think? HOA is angry that I called 311, not 911, to clean up the gasoline leak in extreme heat. Posted by Live Through This 37. I live in a historic building separated into 8 units. 3 weeks ago, where we live, we experienced record-breaking temperatures. Our air conditioning could barely get at 85 degrees inside. I keep smelling automobile-grade gasoline, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. I saw that our neighbors who recently purchased 2 condo units had used a pressure washer and placed it in the hallway and common area. I'm on the 3rd floor with no access to exit the building besides the stairwell, and it was left under said stairwell. The temperature in the hallway read 107 degrees. The pressure washer in an adjacent can of gasoline appeared to implode, and someone had covered the mess with 2 mattresses. Not knowing anyone was in the building, we're the only non-snowbirds in our southern home, I called 311 to ask how to safely clean up the gasoline. The fire company came out, per the operator's instructions, not mine, and it turns out the neighbors were home. The husband shoved me, a 5'5", 125-pound female, and called me a stupid idiot and B, and demanded the fire department leave. Then the HOA president called to say if the fire marshal came and our insurance rates went up, it would all be my fault. Never mind, we live in a hurricane zone. Everyone in the building is actively ignoring me right now. When I checked the community fire extinguishers, they had expired in 2016. The new condo owners who retaliated against me have never lived in a property adjacent to others. They've been doing construction for over 7 months, despite him only being licensed to perform drywall work. I tried to explain that I only called 311 to get advice on how to clean up the gas spill, not to get anyone in trouble, but here I am being treated like a pariah around here. Maybe I'm just venting, but this seems unethical, no? The idiot stored flammable liquids under the only exit route from your home, and the HOA blames you? Time to let the fire marshal know about the expired extinguishers. The HOA should be enforcing rules against people who carry out unsafe practices, not people who report them. This is mental. You gotta report this kind of thing for you and others' safety. Everyone's together. What's going on? These people are nuts. Another HOA story posted by OK13240. This was about 10 years ago, 2010-ish. My family lived in a very nice gated community with an HOA. It was during the summer, and most weekends we would bring our boat to the house on Friday nights to take out on Saturdays, and then move it back to where we stored it Saturday night. The HOA had a rule where you aren't allowed to keep boats within view of the street. Our driveway ran up beside the house, and we'd intentionally position it to be as invisible as possible. For the one night it would be there. Basically, all that was visible was a small T-top over my dad's truck. Our HOA was actually pretty awesome, super laid back, and really only did anything when there was a complaint. It was a relatively small neighborhood, less than 50 houses, and the HOA was really good at throwing monthly parties where we'd shut down a cul-de-sac and everyone would bring food and music and we'd all have fun. This was kind of what an HOA is supposed to be in theory, a good thing. Well, Karen had made a complaint to the board about our boat and had provided time-stamped photos of multiple violations. Mind you, one night a week, but she claimed it was consistent. The president came by to tell us, and it wasn't there when he was. We told him our side of the story. Basically, it was only there for about 12 hours on the weekend, and he said that he nor anyone on the board had ever noticed it. But since they had a complaint, they had to request that we remove it. I completely doubt they'd actually fine or do anything past asking, but rules are rules. Cue my father's mastery of the art of malicious compliance. Well, an important bit of information about this piece of property: when the neighborhood was built, my dad bought the house as well as a property bordering the back of ours that was not a part of the HOA or in the neighborhood and originally had a small chain link fence between it and the house. It was accessible through a small street with a few homes on it bordering our neighborhood. Well, my dad's beautiful brain started thinking about, and for the cost and inconvenience of storing it at the storage place, he could probably just build a pad for it behind the house. He had a gravel pad put in the corner of the property with a shed over it, intentionally as close to the edge of the property so it would preserve the view out the back, or be very visible from the front of the house, either one. There wasn't any real backlash about it. Apparently Karen brought it up again, and the board politely informed her that they had no control over that property, and I think she admitted defeat. The board actually found it pretty funny and never had any other issues with them. Karen moved about a year later, and my parents moved about 2 years ago. I love the neighborhood though, genuinely a positive HOA experience, just an annoying Karen to make life inconvenient. Grumbly Old Man says, "What's better than F you, I'm building a shed money? F you, I'm building a shed on wheels money." Can an HOA tow a illegally parked car? Posted by Lights Out. My HOA has a CC&R stating that we can't have a vehicle parked on the street. When we first moved in, I didn't think it was a big deal because, well, one, I had only 2 cars at the time, but since promoted and have a company truck now, so I leave my car on the street in front of my house. And 2, from then and even now, plenty of people park on the street anyway and have never been towed, at least from what I've seen, and I regularly jog and walk around this neighborhood. The issue here is I have the whiniest neighbors imaginable that ever since I got promoted and started parking my car on the street, they've consistently griped about how they can't back out of their driveway because of my parked car. I tried to be accommodating by ensuring that I park as close to the curb as I can, but I definitely don't want to leave my car parked in front of someone else's house. I also can't use my garage because I use it as a home gym. Woe is me, right? They've called parking police multiple times on me and told me I was fine as I was, and now has the HOA haggling me. The city owns the street, not the HOA, as I've called the municipality to verify this ownership. I really need to know my rights in case they don't chill out and try to tow my vehicle. Am I screwed because I signed their CC&R agreement, or am I okay since it's parked legally and the city owns the street? Commenter answers that if the street's not owned by the HOA, they have no jurisdiction over it, and OP says it's definitely not gated either. Hopefully that's even more of a leg to stand on. HOA harassment posted by Vote for Lobster. I live in a small neighborhood of 52 homes. The HOA board is required to have a minimum of 3 members, but they have high turnover, including our president who just resigned this week. Right now, they have 2. 5 minutes after they send the email saying, our president resigned and we need someone to come on as our secretary for 3 months, so we have 3 on the board till the annual meeting. I received a second email complaining about grass clippings that blew off of my lawn, with a very dramatic overreaction, and my driveway needed power washed. This is one of the many I received this year. Let me be clear, I take good care of my property and I take pride in it. My driveway is under a huge oak, so yes, it gets a little sappy throughout the year, so I power wash annually in the fall before the leaves fall, because the sap is terrible in the spring and early summer. Their description was, it is almost black and dark gray all over, and instructed me to hire a contractor to power wash it. When they reference the subline of the bylaw they're utilizing, this is the line. Prevent the existence of any other condition that reasonably tends to detract from or diminish the aesthetic appearance of the development. Wow, what an outrageous overgeneralization. Can they not utilize that for literally anything they want? It's literally 2 old retired people in our neighborhood, and I've already received upwards of 10 emails. Snow, mailbox paint, stroller left in the driveway by the car, and so on. In your experience, do HOAs usually win legal battles with overgeneralized bylaws? I'm tired of complying and want to push back. This commenter gives the answer, drops the hammer, and says, they're begging for members, joined the board with 2 other reasonable residents, and put a permanent stop to their bullcrap. Nice. We got into a dispute with the HOA and sort of won. Here's the chain of events posted by Awesome Dad for Henry. The HOA issued us a violation saying there was a weed that turned into a tree in our front yard. We asked what they were talking about, and they sent a picture of a tree in our backyard. We told them that that is not a weed, but a cherry tree. We acknowledged it looked overgrown and weedy around, so we asked if we could remove the weeds and trim. They agreed, and we did just that. We trimmed the tree quite a bit. It's on a hill and close to our neighbor's property above us. He arbitrarily cut our tree down a year ago, and we got into a small dispute. He didn't ask. That was the problem. I thought it was all cleared away, but I guess not. It sounds like he's been complaining to the HOA behind our backs. So we trimmed the tree and removed the weeds. The HOA issued us a new violation, saying that it is a weed tree and it must be removed. We fought back and we told them that this is ridiculous. It's not a weed tree. We trimmed it like asked. It is selective enforcement and blah blah blah. So they shot back and said we can keep our tree under 3 conditions. It must not exceed the property lines, it must not exceed the roof line, and it must be manicured professionally by a landscaper twice a year, Twice a year makes sense because this cherry tree grows fast. I don't understand the professional thing other than it sounds like the neighbor keeps complaining and probably making it out to be a hazard. So maybe they feel like if they make us do it professionally, the guy has nothing to stand on with that documentation? We had no clue this guy was complaining so much. If we can get someone to trim it for $200 every time, $400 a year, we will do it. But I think it's crazy that they are enforcing that. The HOA probably doesn't realize that certain trees need to be done certain ways in parts of the year. I hope they don't try to screw over OP that way. Karen puts a lien on my house, but I'm not even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you don't miss this crazy story and fallout, and I'll see you there.